Do you want to quickly increase your mobility? On this week's episode of the Exercises Health Podcast, we're going to teach you exactly how to do that. We're going to cue our introduction and dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back everybody to the Exercise is Health Podcast, brought to you by Muscle Activation Schaumburg. We're your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we are discussing mobility, how you can quickly increase it based on what actually influences mobility and how you can go about influencing those different variables. But we want to let you know that if what we're discussing today is of interest to you, we're going to give you some how-to. But if you'd like our help implementing what we discussed today, that is our specialty here at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, using muscle activation techniques. All you have to do to see our availability and get on our schedule is go to www.matschaumburg.com. So, like we said, Julie, we're talking about joint mobility today, and there are two really big things that influence joint mobility. The first is the structure of the joint, or how the joint itself is built, and the second is the function of the joint. Now, one of these things is easier to change than the other, especially in a very short period of time, outside of some huge trauma. The structure of the joint is not going to be changing very quickly. But the function of the things that move the joint is highly changeable, and that can change very quickly. And so the question is, what are the things that are designed to move the joint, and how do we go about influencing those?
You know, Charlie, the thing that I think people don't realize is one of the best things to do with getting your mobility increased is trying to get your function to be able to utilize your entire structure. So if you think about your structure, it's literally the bones. It's the joint that you're moving. So if we took the knee joint or something, we all have structure in our knee, or the hip joint. We all have structure in our joint, and everyone's structure is a bit different. I mean, there are similarities enough that when we look at skeletons, we know they're humans. But there are enough variations in everyone's structure that we should expect that movement will be different person to person, because of the different structures of that joint. It's almost like saying every single door should open the same amount, but the structure of the hinges of that joint are different, so they actually don't all open the same amount. Like the door on our office here opens up X amount, and then the door that swirls around at the library that we go to, those are different types of hinges, and so we can expect different types of movement. That's structure. That's like your hinges. Those don't change very easily and quickly. Those have very slow changes if they're going to change. So the thing that when you're focusing on changing your mobility that you want to focus on is the function. And the thing that directs the function is going to be the muscles, the contractile tissue. We know that given the right stimulation, the right input to your muscles, they change very, very quickly. They also can change very quickly in a favorable way, like give you more motion, feel less tight, feel more free, feel less symptomatic. They also can change in a negative way, feeling really tight, feeling really crampy or achy or pinchy. So today we're going to focus on what things can we do to change the function of your body so that your joints can be moving as largely and as freely as possible. Also noting that you have a different structure of joints than anyone else, and so respecting that there will be limits here because we all have different joint structure.
Exactly. So the takeaway from that is when you increase or improve the function of your muscles, you will increase or improve your joint mobility. All right, those two things go hand in hand: improving muscle function, and as a result, improving joint mobility. So if you heard our podcast, at all, then you probably understand that the function of muscles is to contract. But there are a lot of different aspects of muscle contraction. But if we're thinking, we're trying to improve how well our muscles can contract. We're trying to improve how much they can contract, and how efficiently they can contract. And those will help us improve our joint mobility. And so there are three kind of really big aspects of muscle contraction. There's an electrical event, there's a chemical event, and there's a mechanical event. And that then results in muscle contraction. And so when we're thinking about the mechanical events, the end result of that is kind of like the output, the strength, all right? And so when we're talking about building strength, that is something that is influenceable, that can change, that can certainly improve, but it takes a little bit more time to change that. We're talking weeks and things like that versus something that is very quickly. chemical events, that's kind of looking at electrolytes and everything like that. And, outside of like extreme endurance events or very rare scenarios, it's really not going to be the limiting factor in how well your muscles can contract. But the thing that will have a great influence over how well your muscle contract are the electrical events and the series of electrical events that happen in order to signal to the muscle to contract. And so because of this, this is where arguably the greatest opportunity lies in order to improve your joint mobility, is influencing the series of electrical events that happens in order to get your muscles to contract. Now, again, if you've been listening to our podcast for any length of time, you know that one of the primary ways to go about doing this is through muscle activation techniques. Like, that really is what MAT is designed to do, to figure out where these electrical events are not happening well enough within your body. And as a result, your muscles aren't contracting well enough and your joints aren't moving well enough. And then to go and improve upon these electrical events, improving the amount of signal that's going from the nervous system, from your spinal cord, from your brain to your muscles, telling your muscles to contract, getting your muscles to contract better, allowing your joints to move better. So MAT is a huge, huge piece of this puzzle, and it is a great option when we're talking about increasing your joint mobility. But if we're talking about things that you can do on your own and something that, might take a little bit less time, just because, it's something you don't have to go to drive to see a practitioner or anything like that. You can just do it, while you're listening to this podcast. Then we want to offer up another thing that you can do, or another option when it comes to improving these electrical events.
That's right. So the thing that you can do right at home, we call it reverse stretching. And it's literally the reverse of stretching. And I'll explain this to you, because a lot of times when you reverse things, you're like, that seems easy. But for some reason, reverse stretching doesn't seem easy until we jump into it. So here's the thing. When you stretch, you are usually finding like where your body is trying to stop you, right? Like if you were going to touch your toes, you're sitting on the ground, you're trying to touch your toes, and you feel all this tightness, right? In your back, your butt, your hamstrings, wherever you feel that tightness, those stoppers. Those are the things that when you stretch, you usually try to like pull into or highlight even more. You try to go past where your body's trying to stop you. In reverse stretching, we're actually trying to do the opposite. We're trying to contract and squeeze into the motion. So if you think about when you touch your toes, the back side of your body gets longer, right? And that's the side we feel the stretch. We feel the back, we feel the booty, we feel the hamstrings. Those are all getting longer, or quote unquote stretched. Instead of thinking about stretching the lengthening side, you want to stay in that same position, but think about contracting the shortening side. When you do this for the toe touch, you would then be thinking about lightly squeezing your abs, lightly squeezing your hip flexors, that's like right in the front of your hip joint, and then lightly squeezing your quads. When you lightly squeeze these areas, we're actually trying to teach the body that, hey, we can move into this position and in a safe way. We know that when we are working with the electrical event, like Charlie was saying, this is all orchestrated by the brain and the nervous system. So if you can't reach forward, it's usually not because you're not flexible. It's always because your brain is saying, hey, we need to stop them there for whatever reason. And the way that we can teach your body to allow you to touch your toes is to change the ability for muscles to contract. So when we squeeze the abs, the hip flexors, and the quads when we're reaching forward, rather than focusing on the lengthening, stretching side, we're telling your body, hey, because more muscles can be recruited now, because we're squeezing and we're turning more muscles on, it will give you more motion. And the time that it takes to give you more motion is so much quicker than you would think. And in my opinion, it's so much faster than stretching anyways. But it will also leave your body safer, less vulnerable to injury after, and you'll get to keep that mobility for much longer.
Absolutely. This was a demonstration that we used to do quite frequently. We would go around to, different businesses in our area, and, they're having a run club or something like that. And, we'd bring our table and we'd do a demonstration just like this, where it'd be like, okay, reach forward and, try to touch your toes, see how far you can get. And then, maybe we'd stretch out and then see how far you can get. And then we'd do a reverse stretch and see how far you could get. And across the board, when you do the reverse stretch, the mobility increased way, way more than with traditional stretching, or, a regular warm up or anything like that. Because again, it's designed to influence the electrical side of contraction, which is going to be the greatest opportunity for very quick changes in mobility. And then as you teach your body, like you were saying, Julie, as you teach your brain, as you teach your nervous system that you can go into these positions and you're not at risk for injury, you're not, vulnerable in these positions because your muscles are strong, you have stability there, then all of a sudden the changes become much longer lasting, through repeated practice. And so you might be wondering, okay, well, how do we go about, applying these? Julie walked you through the steps of like, okay, this is what it would look like for, reaching your toes. You sit down and instead of, focusing on trying to stretch your hamstrings, you're squeezing through the front side of the body, the abs, the hip flexors, the quads, everything like that. And, we generally recommend that you're holding that for anywhere from 3 to 5 seconds. Like it's not a super long time, and you're repeating it, 3 to 5 times. And it's just that little bit of exposure, and you can do it, a few times throughout your day, but you do it consistently, day after day. And that's really the thing is, yes, you will see the quick change as far as increasing mobility, but then the lasting change comes from doing it consistently. And then your body learning, okay, yeah, I can move into these positions and I'm stable, I'm not going to hurt myself, anything like that. And so we actually see tremendous success that a lot of people have when they start to implement these reverse stretches on a consistent basis, especially if they are getting MAT work done, they're doing their strength training, they're doing everything else. They can add this in, and it just helps to kind of boost up their system a little bit more in between their MAT sessions. It helps them recover from their workouts, everything like that.
So when we're thinking about using the electrical system to change your mobility, it is going to be the quickest, most effective way to change your mobility. Reason being is that our brain and our nervous system is what directs the muscles. It directs the muscles on who can squeeze. It directs the muscles on who should stay on tension. And so the more that we work with that and teach our body, hey, we're contracting, we can be in different areas, the more that our body will change, and the change happens very quickly. This is really unique and different to when you're training your body like in the gym, where you have to, if you want to get stronger arms, you have to go and lift, 3 or 4 times a week. This electrical system, yes, it might need to be repeated, but the changes that we see in mobility are very quickly. In MAT, we do a half hour to hour long sessions, and in that time, we're able to change range of motion in a really large way. If you're doing reverse stretching, you're going to notice it right away that it's so different than stretching because you're working with your electrical system. You're teaching your nervous system, hey, we can be strong and stable in these ranges, and that allows muscles to relax and release when it needs to, or contract and hold tension when it needs to. And so by working with this system, you're going to notice that, number one, the range of motion changes very quickly, and number two, it's going to hold longer and feel more stable than when you're doing other modalities.
Exactly. So if you're hearing this, you're wondering, okay, well, what reverse stretches should I be doing for my body? How can I make sure that I'm doing it the right way? Is there a way to make sure that, okay, these muscles are working well before I go into my reverse stretching? All those questions, it's exactly what we can help you with at Muscle Activation Schaumburg using muscle activation techniques. We can assess your body, figure out where your biggest limitations are from a muscle function perspective, do a deeper cleaning, get those muscles working better, and then follow up with some reverse stretching, knowing exactly which ones you need to do for your body. If you're interested in experiencing that for yourself, all you have to do to see our availability and get on our schedule is go to www.matschaumburg.com. On our website, there's a big green button you can click that says Get Started. You can schedule yourself for your initial MAT consultation and assessment. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is experiencing tightness or limited mobility throughout their body, no matter how much they stretch or anything like that, and they're looking for a way to change that, and they're wanting to change that quickly? Share this episode with them so they can understand why doing the reverse of stretching may be a really potent way for them to get the mobility changes that they're wanting. And while you're online, wherever you listen to us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, if you're watching on YouTube, if you wouldn't mind leaving us that 5-star rating and review, it helps our message reach more people. It helps more people come into contact with this work, with this line of thinking, and get exposed to these ideas. So if you've found value in what we talked about today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for being here, everybody. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Wishing you a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.